Arsenal agree £51 million deal for Ezri Konsa. Arsenal fans, let's stop everything. Because we have a massive breaking development coming out of the Emirates. Arsenal have agreed a deal with Aston Villa to sign England international defender Ezri Konsa. Yes, Ezri Konsa is on his way to Arsenal, and this is not simply another transfer rumour. This is a major development. The agreement is reportedly worth around £51 million, with additional add-ons potentially taking the overall package higher. And according to reports from The Athletic, with David Ornstein among those breaking the news, Arsenal have now reached an agreement with Aston Villa for the 28-year-old defender. Sky Sports have also confirmed that Arsenal have agreed a deal for Konsa. The move has accelerated dramatically. Only days ago, Arsenal were still negotiating. Now, the deal is agreed, and Konsa is expected to undergo his Arsenal medical on Thursday. That means Arsenal supporters could be very close to seeing another major defensive signing become official. This is huge because Arsenal did not enter this transfer battle without a reason. Mikel Arteta has a serious problem at the back. William Saliba is unavailable. Jurrien Timber is also dealing with an injury. And Arsenal are about to begin another enormous Premier League campaign with expectations higher than ever. Remember, Arsenal are the reigning Premier League champions. The pressure has changed. Last season, Arsenal were chasing the title. Now they have to defend it. They are expected to compete deep into the Champions League. They are expected to challenge for domestic cups. And that means Arteta cannot afford to have a squad that looks brilliant on paper but collapses when injuries arrive. That is exactly where Ezri Konsa enters the picture. Konsa is not a flashy signing. He is not the kind of player who dominates social media every day, but tactically, this could be one of Arsenal's most important signings of the summer because Konsa brings something Arteta desperately needs: reliability, Premier League experience, defensive intelligence, physical strength, composure, and versatility. Konsa's natural position is centre-back, but he has also demonstrated the ability to operate at right-back. That flexibility could become extremely valuable for Arsenal. Imagine the situation. Saliba is unavailable. Timber is unavailable because Konsa brings something Arteta desperately needs: reliability, Premier League experience, defensive intelligence, physical strength, composure and versatility. Konsa's natural position is centre-back, but he has also demonstrated the ability to operate at right-back. That flexibility could become extremely valuable for Arsenal. Imagine the situation. Saliba is unavailable. Timber is unavailable. Arsenal need another defender who understands the speed and physicality of English football. Instead of taking a gamble on someone who needs months to adapt, Arteta can bring in a defender who already knows the Premier League. Konsa knows the stadiums, he knows the attackers, he knows the physical demands, he understands the tactical intensity, and he has spent years developing at Aston Villa. That matters. Because when Arsenal are fighting Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, and the other major clubs for every single point, there is no time for a long adaptation period. Arteta needs someone who can step onto the pitch and immediately understand the assignment, and that is why Konsa became such an important target. But the story becomes even more interesting when you look at how difficult this deal initially appeared. Aston Villa did not want to simply let their defender leave. Villa's valuation was reportedly much higher than Arsenal's initial position. Earlier reports indicated that Villa were looking for around £60 million or more. Arsenal had previously shown reluctance to meet that valuation. At one stage, Arsenal's interest appeared complicated. Villa was standing firm, Arsenal were negotiating, and alternatives were being considered. One of those alternatives was Ezri Konsa. Arsenal had also explored other defensive possibilities, but Konsa remained high on Arteta's list, and now Arsenal have found the breakthrough. The two clubs have reached an agreement. That is the headline. Arsenal have agreed a £51 million deal for Ezri Konsa. And suddenly the defensive picture at the Emirates looks very different. This is a major statement from Arsenal. It tells you something about the club's ambitions. They are not willing to gamble their title defence on injuries. They are strengthening before the problem becomes even bigger. And there is another important detail. Konsa is 28 years old. That means Arsenal are not signing him simply because he is a young prospect. They are signing experience. They are signing a defender entering what should be a mature period of his career. A player who has already experienced pressure, a player who has played at the highest level in England, a player who understands what it takes to defend against Premier League attackers, and a player who has now established himself internationally with England. That international experience is another major factor. Konsa has become part of the England setup and was involved during the country's 2026 World Cup campaign. So Arsenal are bringing in a defender who has recently operated on one of football's biggest stages. And now he could be wearing the Arsenal shirt. Think about that. Aston Villa's defender, England international, Premier League proven, European experience. And now Mikel Arteta's latest defensive reinforcement. The timing could hardly be more dramatic. Arsenal's season is about to begin. The pressure is enormous. And Arteta has decided that he needs another defender, not next January, not after another injury. Now the deal is reportedly agreed, the medical is expected, and Arsenal fans are waiting for the final steps. So stay with us, because the details behind this transfer are just as interesting as the headline itself. And there is one major question everybody's asking. Why Ezri Konsa? Why spend £51 million on a 28-year-old defender? Why did Arsenal decide that Konsa was the right man? Let's break it down. Why Mikel Arteta wanted Ezri Konsa. Arsenal have agreed the deal, but now we need to understand the football. Why Ezri Konsa? Why was he so important to Mikel Arteta? The answer starts with one word: versatility. Konsa is primarily a centre-back, but his ability to operate at right-back gives Arsenal another tactical option. And for a manager like Arteta, that is incredibly valuable. Arteta demands positional intelligence from his defenders. He wants defenders who can build from the back. He wants players who understand spacing. He wants defenders who can defend large spaces when Arsenal push high up the pitch. And he wants players who remain calm under pressure. Konsa fits many of those requirements. He is not simply a player who wants to clear the ball into the stands. He is comfortable participating in possession. He can help Arsenal build attacks from deep. And importantly, he understands the Premier League. That is a huge advantage. Arsenal are not signing a player who needs to learn the language of English football. Konsa has spent years competing at the highest domestic level. He knows the speed, he knows the physicality, he knows the tactical demands, and that could allow him to integrate quickly. Now think about Arsenal's defensive structure when everyone is fit. Arteta has excellent options, but football does not allow you to choose when injuries happen. William Saliba is injured, Jurrien Timber is injured, and that immediately changes the equation. Suddenly, depth becomes just as important as quality. You can have two world-class defenders, but if one gets injured and another gets injured, your entire system can become vulnerable. That is why squad depth matters. Arsenal learned this lesson during previous campaigns. There were moments when injuries affected their defensive stability. There were moments when one absence created a chain reaction. Arteta clearly does not want to repeat that. And this time, he is acting early. Konsa gives him another experienced option, another player capable of playing in the centre, another defender who can cover on the right, and another Premier League proven body for a season that could contain an enormous number of matches. This is not just about replacing Saliba temporarily, it is about protecting the entire squad. Because when Saliba eventually returns, Konsa does not suddenly become useless. quite the opposite. Competition becomes stronger. Arsenal can rotate. Arsenal can manage workloads. Arsenal can protect players from fatigue. And Arsenal can change the defensive structure depending on the opponent. Imagine Arsenal playing 3 matches in 7 days. Premier League, Champions League, Premier League. That is when squad depth becomes crucial. Arteta can decide who starts. He can rotate his centre-backs. He can change the defensive balance. And he can reduce the risk of overworking one player. That is what £51 million is buying, not just one defender. It is buying options. It is buying insurance. It is buying experience. And most importantly, it is buying competition. But there is another fascinating aspect of this deal, the negotiations themselves. Aston Villa were not desperate to sell Konsa. They reportedly valued him around £60 million or more. Arsenal's earlier position was lower, so the two clubs had a valuation gap. That gap had to be solved. And according to reports, discussions between senior figures at both clubs helped move the negotiations forward. The situation accelerated. Arsenal pushed, Villa negotiated, and eventually the compromise was found. £51 million plus add-ons. That is the reported structure, and it shows how quickly football transfers can change. One moment, a deal looks difficult. The next, agreement. This is why Arsenal supporters should be careful with transfer stories. Negotiations can move incredibly quickly, and this one did. David Ornstein's update was a major signal. The Athletic reported that Arsenal were closing in, then the agreement followed. Sky Sports also reported the deal, and now the focus turns to the medical. That is the next major step. Konsa is expected to undergo his medical on Thursday, and if everything goes according to plan, Arsenal can move toward completing the transfer. But there is one more fascinating question. When could we actually see Konsa in an Arsenal shirt? Timing is important. Arsenal's opening Premier League match is approaching rapidly. The medical is expected on Thursday, so there is a possibility that the transfer may not be completed in time for the opening fixture. Reports indicate that Konsa is unlikely to be available for Arsenal's Premier League opener against Coventry City. That means Arsenal supporters may have to wait, but the wait could be worth it. Because this is a signing designed for the long season. Not just one match, not just one weekend. The bigger objective is the entire campaign. Arsenal want to defend their Premier League crown. They want another deep Champions League run. They want domestic trophies, and they need a squad capable of surviving all of that. Konsa can help. Now let's look at the Aston Villa side, because there is another story developing here. For Villa supporters, this is painful. Konsa has been an important figure at the club. He has spent 7 seasons at Aston Villa. He has made hundreds of appearances. He has become one of their most trusted defenders. And now he is leaving. That means Unai Emery faces another major challenge. Villa have already seen significant movement in their squad, and losing Konsa adds another important departure. For Arsenal, it is reinforcement. For Villa, it is a problem that must be solved. Emery now needs to consider who replaces Konsa. Can Villa find another centre-back of similar quality? Can they reinvest the transfer money? And can they maintain their competitive level after losing several important players? Those are huge questions, but from Arsenal's perspective, the focus is different. Arsenal have their man, and Arteta now has another defensive weapon. The interesting thing is that Konsa is not coming to Arsenal simply to sit on the bench. He will have to compete. He will have to prove himself, and that competition could make Arsenal stronger, because Saliba will eventually return. Timber will eventually return, and when everyone is fit, Arteta will have choices. That is exactly what top clubs need. Quality options in every position. So Arsenal fans, this is the bigger picture. The £51 million is the headline. But the real story is what this transfer means tactically. It means Arsenal are refusing to allow injuries to destroy their season. It means Arteta wants experience. It means Arsenal are strengthening from the back. And it means the Premier League champions are behaving like a club determined to stay at the top. But there is still one major question. Is £51 million actually good value for Ezri Konsa? Let's answer that next. Is £51 million for Konsa good business? £51 million. That is the figure Arsenal supporters are talking about. And naturally, there will be debate. Some fans will say Arsenal are paying too much. Others will say this is exactly the kind of signing a Premier League champion should make. So where does the truth lie? Let's look at the situation carefully. First, Konsa is 28. He is not a teenager. He is not a 21-year-old prospect who Arsenal can sell for a huge profit 5 years from now. This is a signing focused primarily on performance, immediate performance. That changes the valuation. Arsenal are paying for a defender who can help now. And in modern football, Premier League experience comes at a premium, especially when the player is English, especially when he has international experience, especially when he can operate in more than one defensive position, and especially when the buying club is under pressure to win trophies. That final point is critical. Arsenal cannot spend an entire season thinking about potential. They need results. They need points. They need clean sheets. They need players who can handle pressure. And Konsa gives them exactly that. Could Arsenal have signed someone cheaper? Probably. Could they have signed a younger defender? Absolutely. But would that player have been ready for the Premier League title race immediately? That is the gamble. Arsenal have decided that Konsa reduces the risk, and when you are defending a Premier League title, reducing risk can be worth a premium. Look at the situation. Saliba is unavailable. Timber is unavailable. The season is beginning. Arsenal have European football. They have domestic competitions. They have a title to defend. The number of matches can become enormous. One injury can become two. Two can become three. And suddenly a team that looked perfectly balanced in August is scrambling in January. Arteta does not want that. He wants depth before the crisis. And that is why Konsa makes sense. But there is another side. Aston Villa are losing a player who knows their system. That could be a major problem for Unai Emery. Konsa has been part of Villa's defensive structure for years. He understands Emery's football. He understands the teammates around him. He understands the demands of Villa Park. And replacing that experience will not be easy. Villa can take the money, but money does not automatically replace chemistry. That is the challenge for Emery, and Arsenal will be watching closely, because if Konsa arrives and immediately succeeds, the £51 million could begin to look like excellent business. Imagine Arsenal reaching the Champions League knockout stages. Imagine Konsa starting important matches. Imagine Saliba returning. Imagine Arteta suddenly having 3 or 4 high-level centre-back options. That is the scenario Arsenal want. Competition, rotation, depth, quality and tactical flexibility. Konsa could even allow Arteta to be more aggressive with his defensive rotations. He can be used centrally, he can provide cover on the right, and in certain tactical situations, that versatility can become extremely useful. But we also have to discuss expectations. Arsenal fans should not expect Konsa to walk into the team and instantly become the next Saliba. That would be unfair. Konsa has his own profile, his own strengths, his own style. The purpose of this signing is not necessarily to copy Saliba. It is to give Arteta another reliable high-level defender. And that distinction matters. Arsenal do not need 11 superstars playing every minute. They need a squad. A squad that can survive injuries, a squad that can handle 3 competitions at once, a squad that can compete against the best. And Konsa fits that philosophy. Now, let's return to the breaking news timeline. The negotiations accelerated. Arsenal and Aston Villa found an agreement. The reported fee is £51 million plus add-ons. Konsa has reportedly said his goodbyes to his Aston Villa teammates. His medical is expected on Thursday. And once the medical is completed successfully, the transfer can move toward official confirmation. That is the next milestone. Arsenal fans will be watching every update, every photograph, every report, every announcement, because once that medical is completed, the Arsenal shirt could be waiting. And this transfer could become one of the defining defensive moves of the summer. There is also a fascinating possibility surrounding his first appearance. Arsenal could eventually face Aston Villa later in the month. Imagine that. Konsa leaving Villa, joining Arsenal and potentially returning to Villa Park, wearing red and white. That would be one of the most dramatic moments of the transfer. The former club, the new club, the supporters, the atmosphere, and a player caught between two chapters of his career. But before any of that happens, there is business to finish. Medical, contract, official announcement, registration, then football. And that is when the real judgment begins, because transfers are not won on social media. They are not won by announcement videos. They are not won by headlines. They are won on the pitch. Arsenal supporters will ultimately judge Konsa by clean sheets, by big tackles, by important interceptions, by defending one-on-one situations, by Champions League performances, by Premier League performances, and most importantly, by trophies. Because Arsenal are no longer simply trying to become champions, they are trying to remain champions. That is a completely different level of pressure, and Mikel Arteta knows it. The standards have changed, the expectations have changed. Arsenal now have to defend their crown, and every weakness will be attacked by their rivals. Manchester City will be waiting, Liverpool will be waiting, Chelsea will be waiting, Manchester United will be waiting. Every opponent will want to beat the champions. That means Arsenal need depth everywhere, and now they are adding depth at centre-back. Ezri Konsa, 28 years old, England international, Premier League proven, European experience, defensive versatility, and reportedly £51 million plus add-ons. This is no longer just an Arsenal rumour. The clubs have reached an agreement. The medical is the next major step, and Arsenal are moving closer to another major summer signing. So Arsenal fans, what do you think? Is £51 million a bargain for Ezri Konsa? Is it too much for a 28-year-old defender? Can he replace Saliba while the Frenchman is unavailable? Should Konsa start when Arsenal face the biggest opponents? And when Saliba returns, who should Arteta choose? Konsa, Saliba, Timber, or a completely different combination? Because suddenly, Arsenal have options, and that is exactly what Arteta wanted. This is a transfer designed for a long season, a transfer designed for pressure, a transfer designed to protect Arsenal's title defence. And if the medical goes smoothly, Ezri Konsa will soon be an Arsenal player. The deal is agreed. The fee is £51 million plus add-ons. Aston Villa are losing one of their most experienced defenders. Arsenal are gaining an England international. And Mikel Arteta is strengthening a position that suddenly became absolutely critical. The Emirates is waiting. Arsenal supporters are waiting. And now everyone is waiting for that final confirmation. Ezri Konsa, Arsenal's next defensive reinforcement. It looks closer than ever. Stay tuned for the official announcement, because this Arsenal transfer story is moving very, very fast.